Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Newsmakers, reflecting on 2 years since the October 7th attacks. As the genocide in Gaza continues, Israeli war crimes committed in the West Bank garner far less attention. Settlements long deemed illegal not only remain but expand. Will they factor into negotiations or fester to make lasting peace and Palestinian autonomy impossible? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Now, while the genocide in Gaza rightly demands our attention, what the United Nations also considers a war crime in the West Bank has largely been overlooked. That is, of course, the maintenance and expansion of illegal settlements. Far-right Israeli settlers, now numbering over 500,000, not including those in occupied East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, continue building with impunity, deliberately blocking any possibility of creating a sovereign Palestinian state. Here's a look.
Day 2 of indirect talks taking place in Egypt between Israel and Hamas off the back of President Trump's peace plan that he announced last week. It is reported that sessions are focused on creating the right conditions to allow for the release of all Israeli hostages in return for a number of Palestinian prisoners.
I think we've made tremendous progress, and I think Hamas now has been, all I can say is they've been fine. They've been fine. I hope it's going to continue that way. I think it will. I really think we're going to have a deal. We have a really good chance of making a deal, and it'll be a lasting deal.
But like in Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, Israel hasn't stopped military action. Since October 2023, at least 1,047 Palestinians have been killed and more than 10,000 injured by Israeli forces and illegal settlers in the occupied West Bank, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. In one of the latest examples, the Israel army blew up a building in Hebron, the home of a detained Palestinian that Israel accused of carrying out attacks in recent months. Just days after Donald Trump announced a peace plan, giving Hamas only days to sign it, bulldozers moved in, demolishing important olive trees to Palestinian farmers and clearing land to help in building and expanding roads that crisscross the occupied West Bank. Trump's comments from the White House may have sounded clear.
I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. No, I will not allow it. It's not going to happen.
Did you speak with Netanyahu about this directly?
Yeah, but I'm not going to allow it. Whether I spoke to him or not, I did. But I'm not allowing Israel to annex the West Bank. There's been enough. It's time to stop now.
But for many, words in the halls of power don't match the realities on the ground. In some ways, the state of Palestine got the biggest symbolic boost to its own existence after a raft of countries officially announced formal recognition at the UNGA in September. But Israel's actions to prevent a two-state solution on the ground are part of a wider deliberate strategy. In August, Israel's far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich announced the E1 plan, to pave the way for massive Israeli settlement construction and building projects that will cut the occupied West Bank in half. Worldwide, recognition of Palestine and condemnation of Israel's actions has high support from younger demographics. Pro-Palestine student gatherings were a common sight in many US universities. But campuses across the US faced police crackdowns at Palestinian student movements, arrests and even deportations of foreign students. And in UK, the arrests of participants of Palestine Action Group. It's just one of many pro-Palestine organisations, except this one was put on a terror list. Israel is keen to change the narrative, using TikTok and social media to pay influencers to push Israeli talking points. Whether it works or not, the outcome is clear for the people of the occupied West Bank. There is no real, lasting peace for Palestinians to be seen.
Now, before introducing my panel, let's get the picture from occupied East Jerusalem, where our reporter Mohammed Al-Qasim joins us now live. Hi, Mohammed. We said, of course, the focus has been mostly on Gaza, but how much has happened in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, where you are? How much further have settlers been allowed to push into Palestinian land, even physically put Palestinians in danger?
Very little attention, if any, has been paid to the occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem over the past 2 years, ever since Israel began its genocidal war in the Gaza Strip. As the international community's attention is focused on Gaza, Israel has been enforcing, putting new laws, taking new measures in occupied East Jerusalem. Over the past couple of years, at least 19,000 new illegal units in illegal settlements just in occupied East Jerusalem. In the occupied West Bank, nearly 10,000 extra additional illegal units have been built over the past 2 years. That's not talking about the land theft, confiscation of lands that doesn't belong to the Israeli government or Israeli illegal settlers in the occupied territories. And now we're talking about a national security minister. Not only that he is a far right, but he is an illegal settler himself who's been handing out weapons to the illegal settlers, nearly 10,000 at least since the beginning of the war on Gaza, and even more, emboldening the illegal settlers that we've seen a major spike in illegal settler aggression and attacks on Palestinians in the occupied territories over the past 2 years. So the situation is very grim, very dark, and many Palestinians say that the next front for Israel following, if there will be an end to the war in Gaza, it will be in the occupied territories, in occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, Andrea.
Okay. Mohammed Al-Qasim, thank you so much for that. Let's come back to the studio now, and joining me to speak further about the West Bank as well as negotiations now underway in Egypt are here with me in Istanbul, author, historian, and professorial research associate at SOAS, Haim Bresheeth, and Palestinian analyst and former chairperson of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Kamel Hawwash. Joining us from Tel Aviv, journalist and columnist for Haaretz, Gideon Levy. From Ramallah, professor of diplomacy at the Arab American University Palestine, Dalal Iriqat. And from Washington, former Foreign Service officer at the U.S. Department of State, Mike Casey. Thanks all so much for being with me. Dalal, I'll start with you because you are in Ramallah, where you have spent most of your life. So tell us what you've seen personally over the years, really regarding the impunity of illegal settlers and how they've been allowed to work outside the law at huge expense to Palestinian lives.
Well, thank you, Andrea. I want to start by saying that we are witnessing a prime minister in Israel who is basically the new Nicolas Machiavelli of the 21st century. He basically is practicing coercive diplomacy and procrastination. He's buying more and more time at the expense, of course, of the Palestinian rights, where he continues to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, commit war crimes, displacing the Palestinians, evicting the Palestinians, running war crimes, atrocities, and a genocide, while enjoying impunity. On the ground, as you just said in the report, yes, the diplomatic tsunami that we witnessed in New York was really uplifting morally for the Palestinian people and for humanity. It does mend the morale. However, from a realpolitik perspective, from a Palestinian perspective as a resident in Palestine, I'm a Jerusalemite, I live in Ramallah, I grew up in Jericho, I tell you that geopolitically speaking, there is no room for the two-state solution that we are still talking about. In the past Trump's administration, we all know that he took the files of Jerusalem, refugees, the Golan Heights off the table. We thought for a minute that maybe there are some lessons learned and that Trump came for a second era with a new way of thinking. That first of all, the primary party to this problem, the Palestinians, should not be sidelined. And that resorting to international law, to justice, to the principles of the international world order is also necessary, is also indispensable. However, Up until this moment, we only see hasbara, we see misleading of audiences, we see nice rhetoric, very nice rhetoric. The Palestinian people have had enough of rhetoric. The Palestinians, as much as we are fans of diplomacy, negotiations, we want to see peace, we want to see the Palestinian state, yet it's about sovereignty that we care about, inspired by political theory. It's sovereignty on the ground that matters, and not really the symbolic recognitions.
Okay.
It's about the Palestinians now to call upon every member state that recognizes the Palestinian state to translate their words into action.
Okay. Haim, let me come to you, because in all of that, it almost seems like the settlements are just an accepted part of negotiations somehow, when they are and always have been fully illegal. So talk to me about the mindset, really, of these settlers and how entrenched they've become, because they expand and build with complete impunity and then are given a seat, in a sense, at the table when it comes to negotiations.
I think it's well beyond the settlers now. I mean, in Tel Aviv University polls in 24, 97% of Israeli Jews supported what is happening in Gaza. So this is not limited to the settlers. It actually is a psychosis that everyone in the Israeli society shares. Now, you can understand that when people see what happens in Gaza, they forget what Zionism is about. And Dalal is totally right. There is no two-state solution. There couldn't be, because, first of all, Israel is making it impossible. But it's also a two-state solution will keep Zionism alive. If you keep Zionism alive, you will get another genocide, and each of them will be worse. In South Africa, we didn't demand a black state and a white state. No. Humanity and South Africans went for one state for all, with rights for all. So I think that's what we should have in Palestine. This was the PLO program for many, many years. And that way, we will not have genocide. We will not have Zionism. The problem is not even the genocide, because Zionism is the disease, and the genocide is a side effect. It's a terrible side effect. It's a terrible symptom of Zionism. But what we need is to get rid of Zionism. And unless you do that, we will be here talking about it in 10 years' time.
Yeah. I mean, Gideon, we know, of course, it's not limited to the settlers, but they are a major issue. They're gaining strength somehow. So how destabilizing a force are they for Israel itself? How many Israelis now, post-October 7th, actually do support them, when earlier they used to be seen as extremist kind of Israeli society on the margins?
The question is not how many Israelis support them. The question is how many Israelis couldn't care less about them. And that's the main issue. Like Haim just mentioned, it's by far not the problem of the settlers. I must remind you and your viewers that the settlement project came to the world under left governments, so-called left governments, labor, and it never stopped. And there was not one single government in the history of Israel which stopped this project. On the contrary, and not one single international agreement which stopped this project. On the contrary, they tripled after the Oslo Accords. So in any case, the settlers can do whatever they do, because the entire Israeli society is totally indifferent to what's going on in the West Bank, and therefore they are doing what they do. I would like just to mention, I've been yesterday to the West Bank like I do every week. From week to week, I don't recognize it. From week to week, I see more outposts. From week to week, I see more checkpoints, and the brutality of the soldiers is getting worse and worse from week to week. And Israel turns its eyes closed and does not care about this. And the settlers take the advantage. But my main concern is not the settlers. It's those who enable them to do all those things.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Kamel, even if it's not a main concern, at the end of the day, they are still taking Palestinian land. illegally so, and then being treated at the negotiating table as if it would be some kind of concession that Israel would give to Palestine to give illegally taken land back as a carrot of sorts.
Absolutely. And I mean, the reality is that you have the army and the settlers are the same thing, first of all. To try and pretend otherwise is wrong. And I call the Israeli army Israel's biggest terrorist groups funded by the United States, because that's what it is. But in terms of the settlers, the government is using them, working with them, colluding with them to do that. In other words, you don't have the IDF doing all the grabbing of land. They do. But what they say is, here, have some arms, go to the Palestinians. First of all, it used to be cutting olive trees and not allowing them to get there. But now it's about burning and trying to maim. They've killed Palestinians in the West Bank. And the objective is to make the life of the Palestinians so terrible that not quite the same as Gaza, but that they would leave. And that this concept of a Jewish state means pure Jewish state with Jewish supremacy that not only affects the Palestinians, as we've seen, it's extended to occupying parts of Lebanon, parts of Syria, wanting greater Israel. That's all part of the same thinking. And the focus on two people in particular, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, I think is wrong. It is the whole of the government, but increasingly, when I'm asked this question, you must separate Netanyahu from the Israeli people. You can't. They are the same people who go to Gaza and kill and maim. Mothers are not saying to their sons and daughters, don't go to Gaza. They should be saying that to them. Don't go to Gaza. Don't go and kill Palestinians. Don't commit war crimes. But actually, every time there's a poll, they vote to say, yeah, we want them to continue to do what they do.
And do you think there's an issue with Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir especially, seeing the demographics of the settlers? They're the ones having far more children than more, if I can put it, liberally minded Israelis. They see that as the actual future of their voting base. And even if they don't fully agree, I mean, maybe in Netanyahu's case, doesn't fully agree with what they're doing, he's still going to cater to their demographic because that is the growing future population.
I think demographic plays two ways. One, the one that you described. The other one is 7 million Palestinians, 7 million Israeli Jews. What Netanyahu and his government want is to reduce the 7 million Palestinians by expelling them from Gaza. So you have 7 million Jews and 5 million Palestinians, and then go into the West Bank. So the demography is something that troubles Israeli policymakers and politicians, and has been for decades. But the point is, as I said in an article I wrote recently, Netanyahu, the legacy that the creator of Israel, Ben-Gurion, has, was the creation of Israel. Netanyahu sees it as the security of Israel through what he's done, but it will be the isolation of Israel.
Okay. Mike Casey, let me ask you, from the U.S. perspective, where you think this administration really stands on the issue of settlements. Are they being duplicitous here?
I think, to be clear, to start with, that settler violence is state-sponsored terrorism, as was just said, and a lot of it is funded by the United States. I think, President Trump will say something like, I won't allow Netanyahu to annex the West Bank, and call that a victory when that doesn't happen. But at the same time, the settlements are expanding every single day. Every day someone's evicted from an apartment in East Jerusalem. Every day a settler attacks a Palestinian in the West Bank, not to mention what's going on in Gaza. So they're just allowing this to continue to happen, funding the Israeli military with billions of dollars while the Israeli government spends billions of dollars on settlements. And I don't think that they're really focused on stopping it, just letting it happen, letting it continue. And some, like Ambassador Huckabee, have said before that he's in favor of it. So I don't think that they're serious in their efforts to stop it. They're allowing it to continue happening. They're claiming victories when something like annexation doesn't happen. But at the same time, it's expanding every single day, and it's continued to be funded and supported internationally by the United States.
So do you think Trump, when it's projected that he's somehow losing patience with Benjamin Netanyahu because the media will say that Netanyahu isn't listening to the United States, do you think that's true, or are they just in cahoots? They're working together to make it look like Israel is conceding something when they know their plan is ultimately to take as much territory as they can and never even create the possibility for a state or any real Palestinian autonomy?
I think the frustrations with Netanyahu are real, but there's nothing's going to change with that. And we see this with multiple world leaders, is that they manage to play President Trump quite easily into thinking that they're going along with him when they're really not. I don't think he recognizes when they have ulterior motives. I don't think there's much analysis done on different world leaders, what their motivations are, what their interests are, in setting up for these negotiations. It's just President Trump just sort of winging it day by day, thinking he can walk in, sit down, and make a deal with people and not really analyzing the situation. So I think the frustrations are real, but nothing's going to change in that respect. There's not going to be pressure on Netanyahu, and Netanyahu will continue to lead President Trump along because he'll believe that they're making progress when they're really not.
Okay. Gideon, I'll ask you this. 21% of Israel's population is Arab Israeli, and they have lived peacefully with their fellow citizens. Yes, they do face discrimination, we know that, but that is the case for so many minorities in many countries, but still they are part, essentially, of the national fabric. So why do Israelis accept them as citizens, while even the thought of either integrating or just living side by side with other Palestinians seems so impossible?
First of all, they don't accept them. They have no other choice right now, but I don't see a lot of acceptance. Try to be an Israeli Arab, as they call them, student and get an apartment in Tel Aviv. Try to be an Israeli Palestinian taxi driver and see how you are treated. So I'm not sure they are so accepted. But, you can't have them all. So it's very clear that they right now are part of Israel and are equal citizens, so to say. Israelis accepted. By the way, they make also the separation, this artificial, ridiculous separation between them and the Palestinians. They don't call them Palestinians. They call them Israeli Arabs, while their brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles are Palestinians living 10 minutes away from them, but they are Palestinians and they are Israeli Arabs, and Israelis live with them. Part of them treat them very nicely and equally. Part of them treat them terribly, but they are right now so paralyzed in the last 2 years, they hardly dare to say a word about what's going on in Gaza, so Israel can live in peace with them.
Haim, I was hoping Gideon would say that, the relationship with Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis could kind of serve as a model. And instead he said, the opposite, that they're almost just forced to cohabitate. And it's not comfortable for anyone. Do you see it as negatively as that?
Even more so. I think Gideon is 100% right. The Palestinian citizens of Israel, I wouldn't call them Arabs as they do. They are Palestinians and they are citizens of Israel, are not equal, never were equal. They always lived in the first 22 years under military law. They are still not allowed to build in their villages and towns. We've seen on the screen just now the destruction of houses in those, Now, remember, I just want to remind the audience of one thing. 130 years ago, the father of Zionism in Vienna, Theodor Herzl, wrote a book, and in it, in his diary, in his secret diary, he foresaw the total removal of the Palestinian population from Palestine. 130 years ago. This goal has never changed. So they accept them for now because they can't remove them. But they say to the people in Jenin, they say to the people in Hebron, you will be like Gaza. And next, they now say to the Israeli Palestinians, this will be your end if you don't shut up. So this is just a timetable. It's a question of timetabling. Your time will come.
Dalal, final thoughts from you. I saw you agreeing with most of what you heard.
Yes, of course, but we're also reminded that we live in 2025, where Israel for the past 2 years had been scandalized to everybody. That Israel is a state-organized terror, the war crimes are documented, and that justice must prevail for the Palestinian people. And talking about the interest of the U.S. and Israel, I strongly believe that now Trump knows that it is not Netanyahu that would serve his interest, not only in winning the Peace Prize, but also in sustaining and stabilizing the Middle East as he wants. Not for the sake of Palestinians or Arabs or the sake of Gazans, as he bluntly said, but for, securing the trade routes, the control, and his competition against China. He is serious about his own interest. I mean, the U.S. interest, economically speaking, his deal making, his pragmatism. I really wish that we had come up to translating public opinion that we see in all streets and universities into foreign policy. We're yet to see that, hopefully. However, I think in this pragmatic regional deal that I am hopeful, I am optimistic, and we as Palestinians are also optimistic, not because we see that the humanity is prevailing, but because we don't have any other option. We have a right here. It's an embedded right. We face an Israeli military occupation that has been going on for 8 decades, and we're still here. We're still being vocal. We're still living in Palestine, and we're still, being very loud about scandalizing the truth about Israel and how Israel is trying to mislead the audiences with their Hezbollah and with their narrative. Yet, I think we are in a time of history where the tides are turning and that justice must prevail. International law and diplomacy had been put at crisis,
Dalal,
and big questions have been raised. However, I am optimistic that humanity and justice will prevail for the Palestinians.
That will unfortunately have to be the final word for this special edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all 5 of my panelists sincerely so much for joining us, and our viewers for being with us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.